Like you, I'm embarrassed to be represented by Chrystia Freeland and her Liberals at these trade talks with Trump, precisely because Chrystia Freeland and her Liberals do not represent us. They are the complete antithesis of everything Canada is and is supposed to be. Let's hear what she said.
États-Unis. We talked about how the Canada-US economic relationship is balanced and mutually beneficial, how Canada is the largest market for the United States, larger than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. We discussed how all of us are working hard to explain the value of that economic relationship to our American counterparts.
So Chrystia Freeland has this meeting, and Trudeau has this meeting with the first ministers, with the premiers across the province, and then Freeland comes out of it and says, yeah, we discussed how we're going to tell our American counterparts how important their relationship is with Canada. We discussed how we're going to talk with our American counterparts about how important the Canadian markets are to America. And it's like, that's our strategy, hey? We're going to school the Americans on something everyone already knows. We're going to sit them down and say, don't you know that Canada is your most important trading partner? That's the tactic, hey? That's the idea. We are going to get annihilated in these trade talks if that's actually what's going to happen.
It's a win-win. The Prime Minister started the meeting by thanking premiers for their active and effective outreach work. We are taking a Team Canada approach.
Lie, that isn't true. This government never takes a Team Canada approach. They take a Team Anti-Canada approach, and that's been the way it's run since the start.
A number of premiers spoke out strongly in favor of a robust Canadian response to unjustified tariffs. Some premiers proactively identified products that their provinces produce and export to the United States, and which the US relies on, and which should be considered as part of the Canadian response. This included some critical minerals and metals. We are taking a Team Canada approach. We know that this is a moment when Canada needs to be strong, smart, and united.
Which won't happen when the Liberal government is at the helm of the ship, right? When the Liberal government leads Canada, Canada is neither strong, nor united, nor smart. It's none of those things. At least, not the way it's represented. True Canadians want to be united. True Canadians want to be smart. True Canadians want to be strong, but this government is not comprised of true Canadians. This government is not comprised of men and women who want to protect Canada and her interests. Instead, it's comprised of men and women who want to tear this country down. So why should we for one moment expect them to unify the country when for how many years now all they've done is divide the country and work their hardest to do so? Work their hardest to sow the seeds of disunity among the provinces, among the people of the provinces, so that the whole nation is fractured and is unable to do what is right for itself. That's this Liberal government.
And we know that when Canada is strong, smart, and united, when we play as a team, we can be effective and we will win.
Again, so what? We're going to play as a team here with the Liberals in power? Impossible. Impossible. That's an oxymoron. There is no way that Canada can be united while the Liberal government is ruling, precisely because the Liberal government's entire objective, their entire manifesto is to crack Canada. It's to break, not just fracture, but break Canada. They want the country to be so weak that no one has any choice but to continue voting them into power or allowing them to stay in power. Decade after decade, year after year after year. And that's true for almost all big governments. This government grows steadily larger.
We recognize, the Prime Minister, Minister LeBlanc and I, and all of the premiers, that this is a serious moment for Canada.
That's why it's such a travesty that this government is the one, quote unquote, leading it, or leading us. They aren't really leading us. And if they are doing so, it's into a pit of poverty.
We are resolute and determined to meet that moment. Nous comprenons que c'est un moment si ensemble, travaillons en tant que l'équipe Canada LeBlanc.
We'll skip LeBlanc, we'll go back to Freeland.
Sorry.
Est-ce que ça a été évoqué?
Très clair. Okay, and let me just say in English. So the Prime Minister...
cut off energy exports to the US?
The Prime Minister was clear in Halifax on Monday.
That probably isn't true. Trudeau's never clear about anything except his desire to increase the amount of socialism in the nation. But otherwise, he says so much without saying anything at all. Just like Freeland, just like Guilbeault, just like the rest of them.
That Canada, of course, would respond to unjustified tariffs. That is what we did in 2018, and our response worked. Of course, in our discussion today with the premiers of the provinces and territories, we discussed the Canada-US relationship, we discussed the border, we also discussed the economic relationship, and a number of premiers offered strong support for a robust Canadian response.
Again, no idea what that means.
That included some of the premiers proactively naming critical minerals and metals that their provinces produce and which are exported to the United States. Obviously, other ideas were discussed as well.
Premier Ford says 100% tariffs are coming from the US. Do you agree with that?
You know, during the NAFTA negotiations,
Is it a yes or a no? This isn't a difficult question. Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it?
I learned that it's important not to get ahead of ourselves, and it is important never to answer hypothetical questions. I think we also learned that Canada needs to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So our emphasis right now
Is this our lead negotiator? This is the one who's negotiating on Canada's behalf? We're in so much trouble. We are in so much trouble.
is on talking to our American friends and neighbors, on having a very broad outreach that is happening from the federal government. Premiers are part of that outreach. Business leaders are getting in touch with their American partners. Labor leaders are getting in touch with their American partners. And when it comes to the economy, what we are all talking about is how this is an economic relationship that works. It is an economic relationship which is balanced and mutually beneficial. It is an economic relationship which is balanced and mutually beneficial.
Note, there is not an ounce of authority that comes from Freeland's mouth. Not 1 ounce of authority. You look at her American counterparts and the difference in the amount of authority they exude versus what not only Freeland but this government exudes is stunning. Now, no one disagrees that the Liberal government has power. They pass laws and egregious bills and all of these other issues that plague our nation. But as for authority, that's something different entirely. And Freeland, just like the rest of them, Trudeau and so on, doesn't have it.
However, we would be derelict in our duties to Canada if we were not also talking about, thinking about, working on how Canada would respond.
When does Freeland care about her duties to Canada? Right? As far as she's concerned, her only duty to Canada is to tear it down, is to destroy it. Not once has she cared about her duty to Canada. She cares about her duty to everyone other than Canada. Every other nation in the world she's happy to bow down and serve to and make sure their citizens are doing just fine. Come to the country. But when it comes to Canadians, the attitude changes instantly.
Elon Musk vient de traiter M. Trudeau d'insupportable parce que hier, il a critiqué les Américains.
Déferlement politique.
Du président avec
Question principale, c'est
Border plan, you've outlined to the premiers.
Okay, so that's it. The rest of Freeland's questions were in French. I mean, everyone knows what's happening, right? Or at least you can see it from the outside. You have on the one hand an administration that exudes authority, and on the other hand, you would have an administration that exudes zero authority. The incompetence is staggering. I'm not saying they're not successful or are being successful in their mission to annihilate Canada. Clearly, the Liberal government is achieving that. Look at the chaos. Look at the disarray. Look at the problems that are facing this nation. But now, according to Freeland, we're supposed to have confidence in her and those who are working with her that they're going to secure the best deal possible for Canada, hey?